Hello everyone, I'm making this video to tell you about 3 of the most emotional moments for me personally in The Witcher 3. I recently made a video talking about the things I liked in the latest chapter of Star Wars The Old Republic, and I drew a comparison between something that happens there and the latest Witcher game. It made me thinking about the Wild Hunt once more and the things I loved about it, which are many, but here I'll focus on 3 particular occasions where I actually shed tears while playing the game. This is not a top 3 best moments video or anything like that. In fact, it's not even a top 3 video at all. I'll simply list them in a chronological order. And I suppose I should stop rambling and get to the meat of this video. Alright, moment number 1. It was relatively early on, the point at which you help the Bloody Baron deal with his cursed child. In my initial walkthrough, I chose to try and turn the botchling into a lubberkin, and it was the conclusion to that particular sequence that made me tear up for the very first time. On the surface, it's a rather plain scene, Geralt reciting the words for the ritual and the Baron simply repeating after him. However, the atmosphere of the scene is amazing. It's night, it's raining, lightning flashes in the sky, and above all else, great voice acting from both characters. Especially, I would say, that of the Bloody Baron. And finally, a simple hand gesture from this grotesque baby towards her father. It was that moment, the first one where I shed a tear while playing the game. I admit back then I may have been more vulnerable to that sort of scene than most people, as at that time I had a baby girl of my own. Well, I still do, just not a baby anymore. And I don't know if that contributed to me getting so emotional about it. All I can say for sure though is that even now I still love that scene. It may have been what made me realize that this is truly going to be a great game. I remember being so excited and so emotional, and I even talked to my wife quite a bit about that scene and the game in general later that day. Okay, let's move on and talk about the second time. It was later, after I had already finished Velen. In Novigrad there's a side quest, some of you may have even skipped through it. I've always referred to it as the Black Pearl, and I'm absolutely not sure whether that's its actual name. So in that quest you meet a guy, a soldier, a veteran really, who has grown old, and he's looking for someone capable, like Geralt for example, to accompany him to Skellige, because he aims to gather a black pearl from the coast near, was it Arimbjorn? I'm not entirely sure, because a long time ago he had promised his wife such a pearl. In fact, they've talked about it quite a bit back in the days where he was out to war, and it was high time he delivered on that promise. So you agree to help him in exchange for coin, of course, and eventually you travel to Skellige. You meet him by the shore and together you get the pearl. Well, Geralt is the one doing the diving really, but he helps you a little with some drowners you encounter on the way, and throughout this whole quest, the guy is rather cheerful and upbeat, and it all seems to be going well, until you're actually done and it's time for him to pay up. He claims he did not bring any coin because the road was dangerous and he didn't want to get mugged or something. It sounds a little suspicious, so immediately I felt like something fishy is going on, but regardless I agreed to meet him once again in Novigrad so he can finally pay me. And you do meet him once again in an inn in Novigrad. He gives you the coin, and when you ask him what happened, he says that he thinks his wife, Letta, her name, I remember it as it's kinda similar to my own nickname, so he thinks she liked it. And all of a sudden, all the positiveness he was filled with up until this point vanishes. You ask him what's going on, and he reveals the truth to you. It turns out his wife suffered from what seems to be Alzheimer's disease, perhaps an early onset. She started forgetting things and people. Gradually, she even began forgetting him. And since they often talked about that black pearl he promised, it was kind of an inside joke for them, I suppose. He thought that perhaps if he truly brought it to her, something inside her will wake up and she'll remember him once more. Sadly, it didn't work, and she even stopped talking at all. All Geralt has to say is, "I'm sorry," and the man responds with, "So am I." Wishes you luck on the path, and the quest ends. I remember sitting there, completely shaken by this. It was the last thing I expected to hear. There was such a contrast between how the quest was progressing and how it ended. I thought about it and I was just overwhelmed by sadness. And well, that was the second time I shed tears while playing The Witcher 3. Right, and finally we've come to the third and final occasion. Before I talk about it though, I want to mention a couple of notable moments which, while they didn't make me cry, were incredibly emotional. I will briefly mention three of them. All three are between Geralt and Ciri. The first one is their reunion on the Isle of Mists. The second and third one are both endings, one where she becomes an empress, and the other is the worst ending, where potentially they both perish. I'm not going to talk about these moments extensively, I just wanted to give them credit because they do deserve it. Okay, so finally the third moment. Much later on, towards the end of the last expansion, Blood and Wine. Initially, I had decided not to pursue Syanna when the vampires attacked Beauclair. Instead, I chose to seek the Unseen Elder, and to find him you have to get to Oriana first. Together with her, you go to her orphanage. Sadly, as you arrive, it turns out that vampires, or actually one vampire, have invaded the place as well. The two adult guardians had escaped, leaving the children behind as bait. So it is already terrible, and as you explore the building, you manage to find a single child, a little boy, who somehow survived. He's scared to death, but after you calm him down, he tells you of what happened. He describes how the guardians left the kids behind, and how the vampires started taking them as they cried and screamed for help. He had hidden along with his little sister, and he knew well to keep quiet. She, on the other hand, apparently because she was too little, began to cry. In an attempt to keep both of them alive, the little boy shut his sister's mouth with his hands and held her tight so she won't make a sound until the vampire leaves. Geralt interrupts his story as soon as it becomes apparent that the boy unwillingly suffocated and killed his own little sister. A brief moment afterwards, we get the scene with Oriana, where she's holding him and singing her song, the one from the Witcher 3 trailer, before the game even came out. And once again, I remember it clearly, Oriana singing the song in the background and I pacing around my room, and for the third time, I shed a tear. A mixture of sadness and pure shock from the story I was just told by this child. And later I changed my mind, refused to visit the Elder and went looking for Syanna, especially after finding out that Oriana was using the orphans as living blood banks. I decided I've had enough of these vampires. And those were they, the 3 instances where I actually cried while playing through The Witcher 3. It was indeed an amazing game, one of the best I've ever played. Full of such memorable moments, choices, characters, lines of dialogue. I miss it. And boy do I hope they pull something similar off with Cyberpunk 2077. As I'm starting to lose my voice, forgive me. So, what about you? Tell me how you felt about these moments and the game in general. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, and until the next one, thank you for watching. Stay tuned and be good.